We do it better, yeah. And I don't mind if the world spins faster, the music's louder, the waves get stronger. I don't mind if the world spins faster, faster, faster. Just let me take you to a better place. I'm so excited, just feel excited. Take you to a better place. Get a little love and baby, you can hold me on the way. We're packing a days. I'm so excited, excited.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Allie Andrew, and I am the Senior Director of Customer Success here at Built-In. And thank you for joining us today. I'm so excited you guys are here. A few housekeeping to get started with. First things first, everyone will be muted throughout the webinar, but if you have any comments, insights, questions, please drop them in the questions box over in the panel on the right-hand side, if that's where it's at on your screen. We will do our best to fit them in throughout our conversation or at the very end of our conversation here today. Second thing is later this afternoon, you will receive a recording of this webinar as well as a link that we're going to share here today for our just released employer brand toolkit. We're going to expand on that today in today's conversation. And we'll drop a link here shortly. But first things first, a little background on Built-In if you're new here or are fresh to our webinar series. Built-In is a tech recruitment platform, and our focus is helping companies find talent for their most in-demand roles. So we do this by amplifying their employer brand stories to our users. We have millions of tech professionals that visit Built-In monthly, and they rely on us to be able to discover companies like yourselves and also like the two that we have on today's as panelists for maybe potential places they want to join and help start building your team. So in the chat, there will be a little link coming up here shortly for the employer brand toolkit that I just mentioned. So if you want, you can grab that now. It has everything from planning to execution, measurement. It has all the ready-to-use templates you need to start to build and grow your employer brand. So with that said, I'd like to introduce you to today's panelists. First, we are thrilled to be joined by Ryan Finnegan, Head of Global Employer Brand and Recruitment at Snap Inc., and Rachel Giles, Manager of Employer Brand and Recruitment Marketing at Dish Network. Welcome, Ryan and Rachel. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thanks for having us.
All right. Of course. Thanks for joining us. Alrighty, let's kick off today's conversation. I'd love to hear from each of you how you would describe employer brand and why is it crucial? Like, why is it critical to your company? Especially in today's market, why is it crucial and critical to helping you find the talent that you want to bring on? Ryan, I'm going to pass it over to you to get started. What are your thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, it was funny. Just before we started, I was like, I don't know what it means anymore. No, I'm just kidding. Employer brand, it's shifted over the years that I've been working in this space. I think it can mean so much. It can be any movement your company makes externally can impact the employer brand. But when I really think about what employer brand is, it's what is the product that you're packaging up and delivering to customers being candidates, former employees, students, way future employees, that you like, what do you want them to know most about your company at that time, about your product at that time? What is the new service you're providing? It changes over time with the company changes, the product changes. And so for me, that's like the easiest, most succinct definition of it. And in today's market, I mean, it's rough out there, right? And so I think there's a lot of uncertainty, and it's important for candidates to know what they're walking into. People might be coming from a situation that wasn't great or laid off, or fearful about being laid off again, or the stability of a company. So whatever it is, I find when the market changes, the narrative changes. But I think it's just important, no matter where the company is, or no matter what time in the life cycle of the company that you're in, what kind of market it's in, it's important to always be talking about why you're a valuable place to work for a candidate.
Thanks, Ryan. I actually really love that insight and analogy of how you put it, of like the company is the product, right? Your traditional marketer has to market a product that the company is usually selling, but you, as an employer brand specialist, you are the product that you are marketing. The product that you are quote unquote selling is to candidates. It's the company itself. And that's such great insight, and it's super valuable. Rachel, do you have anything to add there? What's your kind of thoughts on employer brand? I'm sure you probably have very similar views to Ryan, but in a different space, potentially there's other outside views that you might have.
Yeah, Ryan, you're 100% right. It's the product that we're packaging up, with our customers being our candidates. And we actually also think about employer brand as the combination of consumer brand, company brand, and talent brand, and how that weaves together to tell one story, right? When you think of a company, you first think about the product, and then you think about the people, right? And so that's really what we think about from an employer brand perspective. And yeah, in today's market, it's really important to be really transparent about what you're walking into, right? From a candidate perspective, what's your job going to look like? What's the expectations? What's the culture? What's the values? But then on the employer side too, we want to make sure that we're getting the right people in the right spots at the right time, especially since there's less openings in the market in general right now. And so it's being really intentional on both sides of the house to make sure everyone understands what we're all signing up for as well. So employer brand is the key to be able to make that successful.
I love that. The key to make it successful. So that actually tees up my next question just perfectly. And it talks about impact. So let's talk about impact in general. It being the key to the company being successful is people that you have brought on to your various teams. That's how the company grows. That's how the product is able to be sold to customers, right? So let's talk about impact. What is the impact of employer branding on your organization, both at Snap and Dish? And how long did it take for you guys to really see the results of those efforts? Rachel, I'm going to pass it over to you just because you kind of hit the nail on the head of what that is and the impact of it. So walk me through that a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm really fortunate at Dish. Employer branding is weaved into everything we do. It is a term nearly every executive knows. It's a term and a function that TA relies on. We're really the core and the foundation for how we're attracting candidates in the market. And from an impact perspective, there's the intangibles and the tangibles, right? And so some of the tangibles are, I know that last year 70% of our hires are influenced from programmatic offerings that I lead. That is huge to see what our actual impact on the bottom line of our business is and how many employees we touch to make sure that allow them to get in the door. And then there's the intangibles of what is just our presence, right? Are we out on the different job boards? Are we out on non-traditional job boards, right? Or just non-traditional ways to attract talent? Right now, there's a million different ways to find a candidate, and we understand that. And so that's part of my impact on my team too, is just knowing, okay, here is our problem that we're looking to solve. Here is the type of candidates we're looking for. Here's the role that's been open for 70 days. Okay, what do we need to do to get that needle moved, to get someone in the door, and really look at how we're driving folks there. And from a time perspective, I've been at Dish for 6.5 years. I started building the employer brand function 5 years ago from scratch. And now I have a really capable and wonderful team who knows what levers to pull when we need to drive hires for product versus our technicians versus direct sales, right? And it doesn't happen overnight, the credibility, the buy-in, the impact there, but it's making the little chips one by one. And really when I was able to be successful is when I translated marketing speak into TA speak. that's when you really start moving the needle, because TA, traditional, delivery functions, you think hires, you think applications, you think what's your conversion rates. Once I started speaking that, then everything was weaved together even more so.
I absolutely love that. TA speak, marketing speak, bringing that together is I think the way that from an analogy standpoint, since it's a relatively newer space, right? You've been in it for 6 years. Employer brand's been around for a while, but it's definitely becoming much more pronounced because market has changed, right? So I think what I got from what you just said is a little bit of patience and also like, how do we connect the dots from other areas? Ryan, how about for Snap? What does that look like for Snap from an impact of employer brand, and then also, again, timing of those efforts that you guys have done over the past so many years?
Yeah. And so I've been at Snap for about 2 years, and a number of companies before then, and often starting the employer brand from scratch, similar to you, Rachel, over at Dish. It's a lot to put in place. And I think one of the earliest signs of success that I see, or of impact that I see, is when TA starts coming to me. They start to learn that language of branding and marketing, to Rachel's point, and they start coming to me and being like, we have this influx of headcount coming for this particular market next quarter. Like, we need to get branding, we need to get the word out. It's great when that happens. It's really great when the execs start to come to me for that too, and proactively, or if something shifts, there's new headcount, there's changes to headcount, how are we going to be telling that story? And so for me, that's a really huge impact early on when you're starting to build out this function, is getting that proactive, instead of having to chase down information all the time, having it come into you, and then you're like, okay, now I actually need an intake form because I'm getting overwhelmed by all these requests for things. So that to me is a really great sign of early success. There's also things you can measure too. I won't belabor the point. Rachel covered so many of them, but it depends really on what you're looking at measuring too. If there's something specific, like, hey, we need to increase diversity in this particular area, and we're running pipeline builders on LinkedIn to help push that, or we're doing editorial pieces with Built-in to help push that, like, what does that look like? And you can get really specific about what you measure over that period of time too. So but yeah,
I love that, because what you just encompassed, Ryan, was that employer brand, there's so many metrics behind it than just hires, right? When you think of the TA function, it is absolutely a recruiter function. It is pipeline hires and like all the way down at the bottom of the funnel. But in order to get to the bottom of the funnel, there's a lot of other metrics at the top that need to be focused on, and you need buy-in from other areas of the company, of the business, leadership, to say, okay, here's how we influence this. Here's how we drive what our end goal is. But there's a lot that needs to happen at the top. So I absolutely love that. Thank you both for your insight on that. Let's talk about trends. So we kind of started this call of like, what is employer brand? And it feels like it's changed. Market's changed a lot. Looking into 2024 though, what employer brands are you both anticipating for this year? Anything that you can prepare for these? What do you kind of do to say, okay, we've got a fresh new year, market's changed. What are we seeing? What does that trends, like kind of analysis look for when you get started for each fresh year that you go into? And Ryan, I'm going to toss it over to you first.
If I had a crystal ball to say what I could predict what happened next quarter, I feel like it'd be in good shape. Yeah, the world is changing quickly. The world of talent is changing quickly. Especially in tech, the space that I work in. And yeah, I mean, gosh, trends for this year, I think this might be familiar to some people or resonate with some people, is less is more, or do more with less, rather, not less is more, do more with less, seems to be sort of the mantra moving into this year. And so really being thoughtful about your projects, your bandwidth, and what's going to have the most impact for the amount of time you have in a day, and the amount of budget you have, and the amount of headcount you have on your team. And so I think just getting really focused, meeting with your business leaders, meeting with recruiters on your team, just understanding the business roadmap as much as you can in an uncertain market, to get ahead of what's coming down the pike. Career site improvement's a big one that we're focusing on this year too. Really improving our SEO, really improving search engine optimization for those who don't know that term, and making sure that we're showing up at the right places at the right time for talent who may or may not know us in really critical areas that the business is going to be hiring in, and just making sure that our career site is a lot more, flows a lot better too. So, you know, a big piece of that too is going to be capturing leads and nurturing leads over time, making sure, you know, people finding our career site, seeing our great content, and then ideally joining our talent community. We can keep engaged with those people over time for when we do have jobs, right? And so we want to make sure that we have this like active, engaged, excited audience in key areas that we can activate whenever we're hiring. So that's sort of it in a nutshell, some of the main focus areas for us.
Yeah, I love that comment of do more with less. And I've definitely heard that many, many times over, especially in the last like 12 months, is how do we do more with less? And it really just comes down to focus of company-wide initiative goal. Okay, what is the one thing, two thing, three things that we can do to impact that? And let's kind of put, you know, most of our focus there rather than having these larger initiatives. How can we be very, very specific with the content that you mentioned put out there? And we'll get into content a little bit later of the specifics of that. But let's, Rachel, what are your thoughts on trends? What other things do you see emerging? I'm sure, you know, everything that Ryan says you probably resonate with, but is there anything else that you see with 2024?
Yeah, we actually had the same call out of do more with less. Like we talked about that in our prep call of just that's the name of the game this year. The other piece that I'm expecting as a theme, at least internally for us, is what does the employer branding look like in the absence of hiring, right? If you're hiring less, if you're not hiring in these certain functions, what, you know, you can't just turn off completely, because we all know that it takes so much longer to ramp it back up than to, you know, keep a steady pace, right? The hum, sing, shout philosophy is something that we follow. And so how do we keep that hum going in the absence of hiring? And where do we start cultivating those relationships with candidates? Start, like Ryan was saying, pipelining, right? So then when there is a rec open, we have folks that are warm. We have folks that are interested. We have folks that we can just convert immediately as well. And then one of the big themes for us from a TA perspective is just, you know, keep it simple, right? Like, don't try to overcomplicate everything, and don't try to do so much that you miss the details, you miss the impact, you miss doing the important things, right? Take a step back and think about what's the end goal look like, and then how do you execute against that? So that's another big piece for us as well.
I love that hum, sing, shout. It's such a great way of looking at employer branding. Solely for the fact you're right. You can't just turn it off and turn it back on again and think magic's going to happen. It is an always on thing that needs to be to some extent happening, right? And that hum, how do you have that hum going with employer brand as a continuous motion is crucial to really expanding that so that you can have those metrics you can measure, so you can see the impact that it's having on the business. So that's crucial. That's awesome. All right, let's talk specifics. Ryan, let's talk about Snap's employer brand goals for 2024. So we talked about big general themes and trends that we're seeing. Let's distill it down to what your focus is for 2024 and what you have your team's goals focusing on. Any ideas or initiatives that you guys have, you know, up your sleeve that you're trying to pull out and get ready to bring new people in.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're still kind of in some of the planning swish right now. You know, as we set our OKRs, and we love an OKR framework over here, and so working through a lot of that. But yeah, like I said, career site will be a pretty big one for us. Not redoing the career site from scratch, but making like really strategic improvements to the flow and the functionality, some of the site functionality, and the wireframes and different elements of it, but SEO, like I said, being a really big piece of that too. So just making sure, like, if you Google your jobs, how do they show up? Is it like a block of text that gets pulled in from some weird place, like a Workday link, because your sites aren't connected? So anyways, it's like figuring out some of those things. Like, how do we actually make sure like our ATS is integrated, our CMS is integrated, and that there's a really easy candidate flow? Because that's stuff that's going to, you know, give us dividends when we're hiring in mass again. So I think that's a big thing that we're focusing on. And yeah, I'll kind of leave it there. But like I said, sort of strategic pipeline builders and things like that throughout the year. But we're a 2-person team, so really getting laser focused on some of those incremental improvements.
So follow-up question to that, Ryan, as being a 2-person team, that sounds like there's probably some cross-functional dependencies to make that magic happen. And I think that's brilliant. It's a great way to Google your jobs. What does it look like, right? So I'm going to ask you one follow-up question to that of like, how do you then use your 2-person team to actually execute on those things? And back to the buy-in and the impact, like what does that look like for you? What resources are you pulling in to be able to help support you? Or is it you and the other person doing all of this work?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like the smaller team is a different strategy from a bigger team, and both of them have their pros and cons, to run within an organization. With a smaller team, it's influence, like how much can we influence other teams to get on board with our projects and to care about our projects. And so for a project like this, I mean, we're working with the web platforms team, we're working with the people tech team, we're working with the comms team, we will be working with the marketing team more closely as we get, some of the newer assets out. But yeah, I mean, it's just making sure that people understand the value. And I think a great way of that we found this, with Snap is like, this is something that we should all care about. And this is something that has real impact, real measurements. It's not like fluff numbers. And it's work that everyone can feel proud to hang their hat on. And so I think that's been a really exciting one that's brought teams together that I don't see happen often. It's not always been my experience working on a career site that it's gone like super smoothly, getting people on board with like making the time to do it. So this feels exciting. And it's in-house, which is also not always the case too, to be working on it in-house for the team.
Right.
But yeah.
It goes back to that original comment about your company is your product, right? And so not only is the team working on product, but you also have the team working on the company itself, which is pretty cool, and you can get that buy-in. Rachel, let's talk about Dish. What do you guys have planned? What's up your sleeve? Where are your focuses? What other cross-functional teams are you going to be working with this year?
Yeah, we're also in OKR development season. We've gotten to a good spot for ours, but we're actually in an interesting spot in our organization too. We just announced a merger 3 weeks ago, like the closing of our merger. And so part of what my goals are for my team this year is reestablishing what our employer brand is. What's our new employee value proposition? What is the new makeup look like, right? How are we telling our story proactively of our new combined company and having it be one story. And then some of the other kind of OKR levels within that is it's also bringing visibility and setting up each of our business lines to win, right? For Dish, we are a house of brands. We have multiple different companies and different industries within us. And so how are we bringing visibility to what our Sling TV division is and what that product is as well versus our Boost Mobile, phone division as well. Like we have cross-functional teams, but that's one of the big pieces too, is just bringing additional visibility to how big our reach is and how much our industry spans. We're also really focusing on experience. That was one of our OKRs for last year. You might be able to see it behind me in the poster, but it's also a big OKR for this year, and it's actually throughout all of HR to optimize experience, which includes, from a TA perspective, it includes candidate, includes customer. We're tying customers to TA, so then we are not seen as a cost center either. We're really trying to see how do we help generate revenue as well, and so we have a big initiative to partner with that team to provide offers for candidates in process. But then digital experience is a big piece. We have been focusing on SEO a lot over the past, back half of the year, I'll say for 2023, and we're continuing that work this year. We're continuing saying, how do we optimize our website? How do we optimize, what's the digital experience look like? What's the candidate journey look like from first seeing some sort of content to applying, then throughout their interview experience as well. And we have a couple more open.
I love that.
For those.
I was gonna say it's another do more with less, but in a different capacity. Ryan had mentioned with like the SEO optimization from career site in general. Same thing for Dish. Yeah. There's optimization from the candidate journey. What does that look like? It's, again, going back to the product analogy, your product, your user, what's the user journey on the product? Same thing with the candidate. What's the candidate journey from one, just knowing the company in general, that first like impression, that first engagement, all the way down to the bottom of the funnel of potential hire. We did get an audience question specific to Ryan's comment about the career site. So Catherine said, "Hi Ryan, I'm also working on refreshing our career site and SEO changes. Can you share what your OKRs are for that? Don't need specific numbers, but would love to hear what metrics you're tracking."
So we're actually working on establishing that right for the first time right now this year. We haven't had a dashboard. We even have Google Search Console set up, or Google Analytics connected to it. So we've got a lot of really great opportunity in front of us. That's really exciting, right? I think for us, it's going to be figuring out like what is our keyword strategy in the first place, and then how are we ranking on those keywords over time. So really establishing those first. After that, it's going to be things like bounce rate. We'll be looking at things like time spent. Hypothetically, time spent for us means people are spending more time on our page because they're engaged with our content, and hopefully that translates into more conversion, with applicants. So returns also will be one that we're looking at too, like return users for us. How many times are people coming back to the site? Are they coming back because they love the content? They're so excited to work here, they can't wait to apply for a job. They're looking out for a job that's right for them. Maybe we should add some language on there about signing up for job alerts, so they don't have to keep, coming back. And what are ways we can sort of help, once we're getting this information. So hopefully that's helpful to start. We're learning this as we go too, and really trying to like apply a thoughtful, like almost like e-commerce mindset to it, which is new for me, right, in this world. And so I'm getting to learn a lot from our internal teams about this, and it's been fun. It's fun to like put actual website metrics to this.
Yeah, it's like a totally different concept that another team typically uses for the product itself, but you're bringing it back to TA, employer brand, recruiting, like the entire function. So that's really neat. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. We're going to move on to another question, because I find this all very connected, right? All these initiatives are great. These trends that we want to do, these OKRs that we want to be able to hit, these projects that we want to put our time and effort behind. But we can't do that without funds, right? The big B word, budget. And how do we get those funds for our team? So I'm sure both of you are constantly having to present very strong business cases to be able to justify the expenses that go into a large, career site overhaul, or with an M&A having to completely rebrand your employer brand model, right? So how do each of you convince leaders in your organization to prioritize employer branding over other priorities? Rachel, I'm gonna have you kick this one off. So over to you.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna take a slightly different approach from what I was originally thinking for this question, because we've talked a lot about always demonstrating your impact, putting numbers in front of them, telling the story, right? Like we talk about that all the time. Like that's always going to be the way to help get your priorities higher, help get, more funds, more resources, et cetera. But what it really comes down to as well is that relationship building with the executives, building that credibility within the business, right? And making sure that you have a seat at the table. That's a big thing as well. It's if your work, or you aren't able to be there to speak about what your work is, what the impact is, what you're needing, then you're not going to get that at the end of the day, right? And so it's building those relationships with your direct leader and all the way up and then across as well. And that's something that, I have a really strong relationship with my VP, and we've been able to work together and have this really open dialogue of, okay, this is what we need to see. This is what we need to put in front of, our CPO, our CEO, whatever it may be, and then crafting it and forming it in a way that makes sense to them. They're not always going to know what the benchmark click-through rate is. I'm going to make sure to tell you what that is and how we're beating that. But also we're not just beating the industry benchmark, we're beating our own benchmark, right? It's not just benchmarking against industry, it's benchmarking against yourself. How are you being better every year, every quarter, every day, right? And so I think that's a big piece when it comes to influencing leaders, influencing others, is just to have have that seat at the table, have the numbers in your mind, on your notebook, whatever you need to make sure that every time you get a question, you have that answer and you are able to action from it as well.
Yeah, I really like that idea of like the relationship. It actually goes back to when we're hiring. It's like you want to be able to build a relationship with the candidates that are coming in, right? Same thing goes for your internal teams and all the way up to leadership. So building that relationship, understanding what they care about, right? And how you can then relate to what they care about so that it connects the dots for them. It's huge. And so thank you for that comment. That's I couldn't agree with you more. When it comes to just trying to get any sort of approval. I can't just go to, you know, our VP of finance over here and say, hey, I want to do this. You'd be like, huh? Why? Give me more information, you know, have a great relationship with him. You tell me like, Ellie, you're crazy. I need more information. But because I have that relationship with him, I know exactly what he wants, right? When presenting that information to him. So I couldn't agree with you anymore. Ryan, your take on this topic.
Yeah, I couldn't agree anymore either. You know, this has been something that's been so important for me over the last couple of years, is making sure my boss knows what I'm doing and that he can speak to it with his boss in different rooms or like with other leaders across the company, right? So, you know, for me right now, it's like I have an MBR, a monthly business review. I put together a document, I send it over to him, right? And I'm just like, here's what we did, and here's why it's awesome, and here's some numbers, and here's how you can go brag about us and like get us some more money for this next thing we want to do. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but you know, it helps build that trust, and then it helps him speak with confidence about us to other parts of the business. And I think also just this kind of goes, it's more like sort of philosophical, but like your say-do ratio, you know, make sure that that's in check, right? Like you're doing the things that you say you're going to do. Building that trust and following up is huge, and yeah, makes people a lot more receptive to helping to fund a project or care about a project that you're working on.
Yeah, I like that say-do ratio. That's another good tidbit that I'm going to pull from this webinar myself of like, say what you do what you do. It's great. It's awesome. I appreciate it. We do have an audience question as a follow-up to this. So from Tim, said, as someone building employer brands solo on the TA team, it can be hard to get on the same page with marketing, who focuses more on company and product initiatives. How can we get that seat at the table when pushing employer brand as important? Rachel, toss it over to you.
Yeah, great question. You know, for us, we sit within TA, but we partner with marketing. We've fostered relationships. Dish being an on-site company, it's really easy to create those relationships too, because I can literally walk upstairs and go to someone's desk. But it's finding that in any way you can, I think, is kind of how we work and say, okay, let's talk about this. You're running social campaigns, we are too. What is your content calendar look like? This is our approach to that. And you know, if you are able to provide some sort of value to them, then you might, you know, have more of an opening to have that seat at the table. But it's also leveraging your own leadership as well and saying, hey, this is roadblocks I'm hitting. Here's where I'm not moving forward from a marketing perspective. I know that this is why I need to be at the seat of the table with them, or I need to have this partnership. What can we do to help, right? And sometimes it is just asking for help too. So those are the kind of two ways that we've done it. And also just like when I was first building my program, I would have bi-weekly meetings with our creative team in marketing and just share, okay, this is what my team's doing, making sure that we're not misaligned with the brand guidelines. And, you know, the creative that my team was putting out was aligned with what their consumer marketing was put out. And so that helped build credibility too, because then marketing knew Rachel will never be against brand guidelines. Rachel is 100% aligned with what we're doing. Rachel understands what we're doing, right? And so that really built a lot of credibility for me as well, because there's a lot of teams that have creatives, a lot of teams that do designs, a lot of teams go rogue. We do not. We know that we are aligned across the board, and we will always be. So that there's a few pieces within that. I hope that helped.
I think that's a really great call out. It's like speaking their language and knowing that you're always going to speak their language, and they're going to be like, okay, I'm good. We're in this box and we get it. Ryan, anything you want to add to that question or anything that Snap does differently?
I don't have much to add there. Just the last thing that Rachel, you said kind of reminded me of just don't bulldoze, like you don't want to make enemies.
Yeah.
If there is work that you can get started with, things like best places to work lists, like targeted pipeline builders, like maybe you have control over LinkedIn, maybe there's certain things you do have within your control. Focus on that and like don't exhaust yourself on like an uphill battle that might just take some time and some trust building to get over.
Yeah, that's a great call out. It all comes down to trust, transparency, and like communication with all of these cross-functional teams that you're working with. So that's great. Thank you for that question too, Tim. That was a good conversation about it. We've talked quite a bit about challenges today that we faced from just market trends, what we're focusing on from 2024, how to make those decisions. But are there any specific challenges that you've personally have faced managing your employer brand for each company, and how did you overcome it? Ryan, do you want to start with this one?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I feel like the changes, they shift, and it's a challenging time right now, for sure. The market that we're in, tightened resources and headcount, yeah, it's just not an easy time to be an employer brand, and or to be an HR or TA in general. Just being expected to keep going, with less, and you have like these challenging candidate conversations of people who are trying to find jobs, and it's a hard situation kind of all around to be in. I don't know that we're on the other side of this one yet, so I don't know how I could speak to the challenge of overcoming this current market. But what I will say is building these types of teams from the ground up, it's important to pause and celebrate the wins that your team is doing and not just looking at what other brands are doing, because you don't know how long the other brands have been at it for. You don't know like what kind of resources they have internally, or like what kind of teams are helping to support this work, what other resources they have globally to help support this work. So with you and your small team and TA, overall, if you report into TA or comms or HR, wherever you sort of report into, just make time to celebrate your team and celebrate wins, and you all can get through so much together. But just make sure that you're like recognizing that and not just always being like, and this is something I've had to learn over time, not like, okay, next, great, we did that thing, move on. Like, look at all these other things we got to do, but like pausing and being like, oh man, look how far we've come. Or we did this great thing, we got through this. And I think that's just critical when you're in a challenging situation, to be recognizing that. And that can get you through so much. It's just making sure you keep up that team morale and, recognize the wins when they come.
Yeah, you mentioned it with like candidates. You're having very challenging conversations with candidates and it's leading with empathy, but then also internally your own team is dealing with challenging things as well, with the market. And so it's like turning around that empathy towards them and being like, yeah, let's stop, pause, and let's think about this, right? Let's celebrate what we have done, and then let's move forward rather than the bulldozing straight ahead. So I love that. That's great. Thanks, Ryan. Rachel, anything you want to add there?
Ryan, I loved the call out of stop to celebrate the wins. Sometimes we're moving so fast that we forget to do that, or we don't have time to do that, or we have too many things in our mind, right? And I think that comes along with an employer brand. We wear so many hats. We own so many digital properties. We own so much, right? And so it's really easy to just move. I'm constantly running around physically and literally. But it's also just, I think a big challenge for us is how do we prioritize? What do we prioritize? How do we, and that's a continual thing that we're overcoming. That's not a challenge that I've overcome, right? There's always competing priorities. There's always competing asks. Everyone thinks their ask is the most important ask. And so our approach to that is, okay, what's the biggest impact? If an initiative has a bigger impact, that's really where we put our efforts. We have to do some of the non-negotiables, the hum, like I was saying earlier, to keep the lights on, keep things moving. But we announced the closing of our merger and Best Places within a week of each other. And those were two of our biggest initiatives for the entire year from an employer brand perspective. And they were a week apart and they did not have time to, have space for each other. And so for that, we're like, okay, this is what we're doing for merger. Okay, what can we just like hold off 1 week to do with Best Places? And so that's something that we talked about too, of like, okay, how do we slow roll this? Or how do we like give it space to have time for itself too? Because if we're also putting too many messages out in the market at one time, it makes candidate confusion as well.
Yeah, it sounds like a little bit of like slowing down to speed up, prioritizing what is the biggest impact right now, because we can't do everything all at once. The do more with less idea and philosophy is kind of really the best way to look at any challenge that comes your way, and like, okay, this is how we're going to overcome it. Let's stop, pause, look at the laundry list that we've got. What's the top priority? Okay, let's focus on these and we'll get to the rest of them later. So great, great viewpoints on it, and thank you for that. I'm going to switch gears just a little bit, and I want to talk about like the nitty gritty specifics of employer branding, like topics and channels, and the different resources that you both are utilizing at both Snap and Dish. So let's start with topics and how you're coming up with your topics, how you're deciding on your topics. How do you determine which are going to be the most compelling that your team is going to focus on at that given point in time? And I'll start with Ryan. So do you want to take this one in terms of, let's start with just the topics in general, and like, how do you build out that like content plan over the course of the year?
Yeah, that's actually, we're in the process of doing that right now, sort of aligning that for the year. We work really closely with internal comms on this too, and the comms team in general, but internal comms we're really closely aligned here. And they produce a lot of the content, for some of the internal newsletters and things like that. And so we get to really benefit from that. They're like fantastically talented, and I am very lucky for them every day and all the work that they do. So when it comes to topics, though, something that I really like to focus on is talking about the actual work that employees do. And I think it's especially critical in heritage months and things like that too. You're talking about the work people are doing. You're not just talking about like a specific identity of a person. So I just kind of want to throw that out there too. Like, that's something that we really like to focus on no matter what, is like, here's an awesome person doing awesome work. And here's like why that's really important for our company. So that's like one really clear area for us. I think another area for us too that we're starting to, Built-in, I'm going to give you a shout out here because I love the contributor network. It's something that we're going to start looking at more too, is actually having our employees give their own personal voices to something that they're experts in, a specific technology, or specific language, a specific framework. It's not about our company, but it's highlighting them, and it's really great for their personal brand, right? And so that's something that is really exciting to help the employees with too, great recognition tool, and gets people really excited and willing to spend time writing something too, right? If it's benefiting them as well. And then when it comes to like our LinkedIn strategy, if we're thinking about content on there, we have a kind of an interesting approach where we tend to reshare our employees more than posting our own content, and use it more as like a social media versus just necessarily like, we do post company news on there, but we're really big about sharing employee voices on there, because I find that sometimes employees say it better than we could, and it's maybe taken a little bit more seriously than like if company says this thing, it's like, oh, company's saying that thing. But if like person says this thing that works there, it's got a kind of a different feel. So but yeah, those are some of the areas that we're thinking about for next year. Yeah, leadership, check-ins and things like that, and leadership points of view always do really well with candidates, and just kind of across the industry. So a couple areas we're looking at.
So it really sounds like your topics just revolve around your people, like who you have, and amplifying your current people to then draw in the new people. And I love that. And I think that's a really great way of looking at topics for them. And like, okay, what's in the trend? What's in the markets right now? What's trending? Okay, we're going to talk about this topic because it's a market topic, but it's more so, it's like, you're amplifying your current team, and you're the voices of the people actually doing the work for the physical product itself. So that's really cool, and I like that philosophy. Rachel, how about Dish? What does Dish look like when you guys are putting together your content plan for the year? How are you choosing those topics? How are you putting together, the philosophy behind it?
Yeah, so when we're creating our content strategy, we have pillars that work throughout all of the year. And so for us, that's innovative work, showcasing our people, better together, being on site, and then growth and opportunity within our team members. Those are ones that are kind of bled throughout everything. But then we also then break it down by quarter. Okay, this is our quarterly content strategy. This is our quarterly topic that we're focusing on. And then we have, like Ryan said, we have our cause months that we know that we want to feature certain employees. And so then it's saying, Black History Month is coming up in a couple days. And so how are we showcasing our team members and the innovative work that they're doing, how they grow within the organization, what their experience has been, post-merger, as an example as well. And so that's kind of how we break it down. We start off with, okay, these are our pillars. This is our quarter. And then, okay, these are the non-negotiables. And then the other thing that we do is try to have a balanced approach between, sharing culture, sharing about community, sharing jobs, sharing news. So then it's not, 4 testimonials in a row or 4 news articles in a row as well. We like to diversify it across the board too. And something that I really like that we've started over the past couple of months is when we do have news articles, we just launched a new Samsung phone with our Boost Infinite team. And so we announced that, that from a news perspective. And then 2 days later, we actually showcased the person that made that happen. Showcase the person who partnered with Samsung to make that happen, right? And so even when we're talking news, then we're highlighting our people, because it's all about our people, right? Like our people are the ones that make our business happen. Let's highlight more on that. And so that's something that I really love, that we've made, deeper levels and deeper WIFMs for folks that are following us.
Yeah, I think both of you just hit the nail on the head, that the topics come from the people, highlighting the people, because those are going to be your best advocates or salespeople for finding your new people, right? And really amplifying the employer brand. And that's awesome, because yeah, you can say all the things that you want about yourself, right? But people are gonna be like, no, I don't know if I really trust exactly what you were saying. But if someone else is saying those things, then yeah, it provides a bit more validity to it. And then again, trust to the person that's consuming it. So I absolutely love that. And I like, Rachel, how you pair a product launch with then, who did that, right? Who put, the blood, sweat, and tears into that product launch, and seeing now, it's kind of opening up the box and seeing the full, ins and outs of it. So that's really cool. I really appreciate that. So we have topics, right? How do you guys decide then what channels they're going to? Ryan, you mentioned a little bit about how you leverage LinkedIn in a different capacity, of more of a social media capacity, but I'm sure those aren't just your 2 channels, built in LinkedIn. Rachel, I'm going to feel like you have the insight into this, but how do you prioritize the different channels and decide, what content is going on which, and how are you then tailoring that for your audience, your potential candidates that are coming to your brand?
Yeah, channels is always a fun question, because we all have the non-negotiables. We all have the ones that we all use, right? The big guys, LinkedIn, Indeed, as examples, right? But then from there, when we're evaluating channels or thinking about how are we tapping into new talent, it's looking at, okay, what are we hiring for? What is the makeup of the candidates? And then what kind of platform or channel can work for that? Shameless plug for Built-in. Built-in's one of our favorite partners. And with it being, we partner with Built-in Colorado specifically, and we are a Colorado born and bred company. We are on site first, and we are hiring a lot of, tech talent. And so Built-in kind of checks all of our boxes there. But then we also are looking at what are other Built-in-esque niche channels that we can look at. Built-in does a really great job of not just being a job board, not just being a blog website. Now, there's so much more earned media value that Built-in has given us from listicles, from the individual contributors, from the news, right? There's so much into it. And so, that's something that and also shout out to Sarah and Adam, if you guys are are watching. Love you guys. But that's something that we're looking at for this year too. Like what other like built-ins are there for, you know, product's a big thing that we're hiring for like accounting and finance. That's always a big need from a shared services perspective. And like what's it like a niche something for them. And so that's kind of what we look at when we're looking at vendors. It's not just, okay, what are their offerings and what's the cost? It's, okay, what's the offerings, what's the cost, what's the impact that they'll have? What is the ROI? And then also continually, when we do have partners, managing the partnership towards those ROIs. Okay, these are the goals we established at the beginning of the contract or the year or the whatever. How are we actually going against that? And Built-in, another shameless plug, you guys do a great job of every single MBR and QBR. We're talking about the goals. We're talking about how we're tracking towards them. We're talking about, okay, what do we need to do to make sure to move the needle more?
Yeah, that's great insight. Thank you for that. Ryan, any other additions or different ways of looking at the channels or strategy that you guys look at the channels for with your topics and whatnot?
I think it just goes into the theme for me is like more with less, you know, this year and really focusing efforts on the channels we do have and what's within our control. So like building out our career site blog for the first time, you know, we don't have one yet, you know, so building that out and the whole strategy for that, it's exciting. It's a fun project. But is that, you know, Built-in LinkedIn, some of the heavy hitters, there's certain things we're not going to be investing in this year. There's certain things that I'm like really excited about for a future state to explore. I don't know if this is the year for it, but you know, Reddit, I'm curious about, you know, for advertising and things like that. There's like different areas, you know, just to help drive leads. But if anyone has experience, you know, with that particular platform, let me know. But from the content editorial perspective, you know, as Rachel said, Built-in's been a really fantastic partner and is our partner for editorial where we work right now. So.
Well, I'd love to hear that. And I promise you guys are not paid to be here to say these things today. So thank you. We greatly appreciate that. We actually love partnering with you guys and working with you both companies. It's been a great partnership that we've had. So thank you. And today's insights have been awesome. I really appreciate both of you guys being here. We are coming up at time. So before we end today's discussion, what is one thing you want folks to walk away with? What would it be? And I'm going to start with Rachel. What's like the number one thing about employer branding that if you can be like, this is the magic, this is what I want you to walk away from today with?
Yeah, I'll say don't try to be everything to everyone. And that is with your candidates, with your leaders, with yourself, right? We can't all be everything to everyone. We can't, you know, do everything at once either. Something that I got as feedback a few years ago was get it to 90% before you add, right? You know, if you're building a new initiative, building a new, you know, launching a new product or project, a new program, get it to 90% before you start developing another program, before you start, you know, launching another enhancement, right? Like get it to that point where you're like, okay, it can live, then continue to add, right? And you know, the other takeaway is it's OKR season, like we were saying earlier. Get locked into your OKRs. You know, one thing that really propelled me is being able to understand not just what the OKRs are, but how I personally impact them. My first few years in TA, I was like, oh, well, that's a recruiter metric. That's not really me. It's like, no, I actually help influence that. I touch every single one. And so that's the other thing. It's like, just get really, really sharp with your business acumen and knowing how you impact everyone too.
That's great. Ryan?
Just take care of yourself and take care of your team. It's kind of a bumpy start to the year. I think for a lot of folks, and it was a rough last year. And yeah, just remember that, like, you know, there's a whole community of employer brand folks out there. And if you're a team of one, you're not alone. You know, just reach out and, you know, I'm sure anyone on this call will be willing to connect with anyone else on this call. I find employer brand people really like to stick together and help each other out. So yeah, just reach out when you need something, and, you know, we're all here to help each other.
I love that. I think that the two of them just like sync so nicely. Like, don't try and be everything at once, and know that you got to take care of yourself, and there's people that are there to help. Like, don't feel like you have to do it all. So with that, thank you. Thank you so much for being here today. We had an incredible discussion. This was super fun. I enjoyed myself. I hope you guys did too. And also the participants on the call, I hope you all took something from this, that just one single takeaway that you can, maybe apply to your day today, or maybe even tomorrow, or if you're still in OKR season, like all of us here, maybe it'll influence a different viewpoint to that OKR to kind of help, move the needle for your team. So thank you for spending an hour with us. The recording will be sent out to you by end of day today. I hope everybody has a wonderful and fantastic Thursday. Stay healthy. Enjoy life, because it's good. We are very lucky. We have jobs, that we are doing things to help people find new jobs. What we get to do is actually really fun and exciting. So I hope you all have a great rest of your day and weekend. Thank you and goodbye.
Bye.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Bye.